Fred, the meeting's not over yet.
Promise I'll be back.
Is it for Rick?
It's difficult to get the power out.
That's what I told BJ, thank you for not having a pile of papers. You ready to commence?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're gonna do minutes. BJ, any, what was your thoughts on those?
I found them entertaining and I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
PJ?
Yes.
John?
Yes. Okay, we're going to go to Mr. Dixon, first on the agenda.
Mine's rather brief.
Of course, he's here to discuss the pavilion.
The last meeting, we were looking for final drawings from the engineer. We got them. And 7 days ago, I submitted them for approval for a permit. Heard back today. They want some additional information. The engineer that reviewed it, he's looking for the gauge of the metal roof. He's looking for little stuff, about 3 or 4 items, that's all. I sent a copy of the adjudication to the engineer, and he's going to submit a letter back to the building department, noting all of those issues that the engineer wants to see on the drawing. So we should have a permit, if not by the end of this week, first of next week.
So we're right on schedule.
Right on schedule, ready to go.
Okay. Is there anything else?
I think that's it for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us to fire department.
Okay, I have 2 things. Year-to-date calls is 419. Last year at this time we had 329. We're up by 90 calls. The second thing I wanted to mention is on the 10th we had a power outage and the generator at the station failed, as well as the township road garage, 2 different reasons. But I put a request for repair that was $623 requisition. That was for them to come out and get the transfer switch working. It's not completely fixed though. We have to take and fill the power to the building in order to be able to fix it properly. So this is an emergency call we had because the power was out to the building. I'm waiting for them to give me a quote, and I'm getting a quote from CEI to fill the power. So once I have that information, then I'll be back to talk about the requisition for that.
Okay.
So with that being said, Mr. Mario Minacci, our corporation president, is here to talk to you, and along with our treasurer, Dan Metzko.
Well, thank you guys for having us. So we got just a few handouts so you can follow along here. Brad, I'll give you one for Mr. Tony too, if you don't mind. So, as Chief Phillips said, we've had a pretty busy year. We've been pretty busy over the last few years, but the department's definitely been growing a lot. So we're hoping to talk to you guys about potentially seeking some additional funding tonight. So do a little bit of a brief overview of the reasoning for that. So a little bit of department history. You guys know we started in 1953. And then in 1954, they built the first station. So now, moving forward to today, we've got 3 firefighter staff 24/7 We ran 655 calls in 2019. We're looking to be above that by, as of right now, 150 to 200 calls for this year. Provide fire inspection for the township. We're part of the Geauga and Portage County Water Shuttle, Geauga County Fire Investigation, and Geauga County Dive Team. Right now we have 35 members. Of those, we have 17 paramedics, 5 EMT advanced, and 12 EMT basics. And unlike previously, the majority of our staff don't reside in Auburn Township. So as we've gone out and recruited some more applicants, we've been getting people from a wider geographical range. So I think we're all the way out to Westlake at this point as one of the furthest drives we've got for one of our guys. So as you guys know, majority of what we do is EMS related. If we're including motor vehicle crashes in that statistic, it's about 65%. The other 35% is made up of a mix of fire calls, utility calls, cancel alarms, false alarms, and automatic tanker responses, which is where we're taking the tanker out of the township to respond to other areas. Most of the calls that we're responding to require more than one piece of apparatus. So just a brief overview, the bar graph that you guys have of our calls by time of day. So that's broken down into 6-hour windows. So we have a little bit of a lower call volume at night from midnight to 6 a.m. But unfortunately, that's also the time where we have less people coming in responding from home. And then the next graph is an overview of the double hits that we've had. So those are simultaneous calls. So anytime we get paged out for another alarm prior to returning from the one that was before that. So we've seen a pretty steady increase. We're on pace for about 60 for 2020 so far. So definitely seen an increase in that.
60 events or 30 events?
60 calls that are back to back. So that's, there would be 120 overlapping calls in that. So the next piece of information you guys have is our apparatus replacement schedule, which we usually share with you guys when it comes time for us to do our budgets. So just kind of the highlights here. So fortunately, we were just able to replace our first out structural firefighting engine. We took delivery of that in March, and that is in service as of last month. So we're really excited to have that. Past that, we saw a lot of our trucks coming in the late 90s to early 2000s. So a lot of those are getting to the 20-year mark at this point. So we're looking down the road as to when we're going to replace those. Unfortunately, fire trucks are pretty expensive, so we were at about $550,000 for this new engine that we took delivery of. We're looking at probably $650,000 to $600,000 for a new rescue engine and a new tanker. In the next couple of years, we're probably going to need to replace one of our ambulances. We're looking at around a $200,000 mark for that. So that's our 2006, so it's about 14 years old at this point. But the majority of these apparatus we've been able to extend past their projected lifespan, and the majority of that's due to our apparatus coordinator, who's Captain Artman. He does a really great job keeping up with preventative maintenance. So we're really trying to push the life of those vehicles the best that we can, while still making sure they're ready to go and they're going to be safe vehicles to either transport patients in or respond to incidents with. So we're in a pretty good place right now, but we're always looking to improve. So one of the biggest things we can always do as a fire department is continue ongoing training for our members. Everything's constantly evolving. Building construction changes, new kinds of cars that we need to stay up to date with, and obviously whatever the latest medical treatments are and our protocol updates, working closely with our med control to make sure we're up to date on that. Another thing that we've been working on recently is kind of bolstering up our fire prevention department. So one of the things that we have in place now is one of our firefighters who's taken over developing some pre-incident plans. So he's going out usually with the guys that are on shift to some businesses, buildings in the area, taking a walk around, talking to whoever either the building owner is or the maintenance staff about what some of the hazards are, and then bringing that information back to the department so we have that available when they're responding to calls. Another thing we can do is add some additional staffing in there, and we're recently looking to increase or decrease rather, our ISO rating. So we kind of put together a improvement plan with that at its base. So I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with ISO. I'm sure it's a term you've heard thrown out there before, but that's the Insurance Services Office. So they're a for-profit company, and they essentially rank fire departments on their ability to provide fire protection. Those ratings are anywhere from 1, which is the best, to 10, which is the worst. As it stands right now, we're rated at a 9, which is pretty typical of a department such as this. The biggest thing that goes into these ISO ratings is water supply. So obviously not having some type of city water out here where we're bringing water in and hauling it in, that's a pretty significant detriment to what we can get that rating down to. However, we're hoping to have that down to an 8B in the next few months. And then ultimately we'd like to, in the next 2 years, get down to a 7. It's a 7 hauled water, which is a separate classification for areas like this where we're bringing water in. So one of the biggest things we can do to improve on that rating is adding some additional staff and ensuring that we have 4 guys responding to any incident that occurs in Auburn Township. That's a big criteria point for them, but it also affords us with a lot of different opportunities to enhance the services we're providing. So that would allow us to respond with 4,000 gallons of water instead of the 1,000 that we respond with on our engine right now. So it would be an engine as well as our tanker that would be responding to any incidents in the township, any fire-related incidents. So the general water supply number that we use is 400 gallons a minute. So that affords us about 10 minutes on scene while we're waiting for our mutual aid companies to arrive, so we can establish a further water supply. So being able to respond with that tanker is giving us, a pretty significant increase in how long we're able to operate without having to rely on mutual aid. As it stands right now, we have Bainbridge responding, as well as Troy Township with the tanker. So getting another 3,000 gallons of water from Troy, but not always a guarantee. We're counting on the fact that those departments have manpower available, apparatus available. So definitely a little more reassuring to have the resources in the township. So our hope with the ISO rating is that ultimately being able to provide a better service to the township. But another nice addition to that, hopefully, is we can lower down to this 8B. We're hopeful we can pass some home insurance savings on to some of the residents. We've done a little bit of research. It varies a lot from between insurance providers. So it's something that we haven't gotten a lot of great answers on. But
how many fires do you have those numbers for me? How many fires did we do last year? How many have we done so far this year? Pie chart there. Yeah.
So as far as I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. Do you have them, Chief?
No, I don't.
So obviously, fire and the EMS side of things is where.
Right, but this is all fire related.
Right. So we'll get into the EMS
I'm
shortly
sorry.
here.
Let me
I'm-
finish your
No,
presentation.
that's fine. The ISO rating is strictly looking at the fire side of it.
Right.
They aren't addressing the EMS side, which is
Great.
a little bit of a downside for them, seeing as how most departments are doing both fire and EMS. So that's the one aspect that we're looking at. If we are able to add some additional staff, one of the biggest benefits that it gives us is that we'd be able to manage some simultaneous calls. So we'd be able to staff 2 squads at that point, making sure that we still have people in the township, even when we are tied up on another incident, to respond to that call. That's going to vary, just depending on what kind of incident we're tied up with, but for the majority of our EMS calls, we're sending 2 guys on the squad and 1 in the chase car, and then bringing just 1 guy back to the station who's available. The other thing is it allows us to adhere to some of the NFPA standards, which is the National Fire Protection Agency. So they have a standard for 2 firefighters that are in the building. You're supposed to have 2 outside who are ready to go in the event that there would be a call for help. There's also an OSHA standard behind that as well. Not as well versed in that one as the NFPA one. And the biggest thing is the mutual aid that we're getting from other departments is not a guarantee, unfortunately. Some of the bigger incidents we've had recently, even though we have Bainbridge next door, who's a full-time department, they're staffed with 6 to 7 guys on shift, they're not available. They've seen an increase in calls as well. They're sometimes out on 3 simultaneous calls, so everybody around us has been a little bit busier. So we talked about our 2 in, 2 out rule, but one of the other things when we're arriving with 3 people to, whether it's a fire, a car accident, anything, there's a lot of tasks that have to be performed in those first few minutes, and it's difficult to accomplish with 3 firefighters at times because we need all those people to be hands-on. So unfortunately what we lose out of that is having a true incident commander who's able to listen to radio traffic, assess the situation from a little ways back, make sure everything's safe, and be able to oversee and conduct everything that has to go on for that incident. So kind of our financial overview of where we're at right now. Our current annual contract is for $696,000. That's the amount that we've been at since 2012 was the last time we saw a contract increase. And prior to that, there was a small contract increase in 2011 as well as in 2010. Our last levy that we passed was on May 4th of 2010, and that was where we saw the biggest increase in funding. We generally account for about $100,000 in revenue through EMS billing. Not always a guarantee, varies from year to year, just depending on calls and what reimbursement looks like for that year. It's always variable. Our average annual expenses right now are at about $880,000. So fortunately, everybody who's been in this position before me has done a very good job being frugal, making sure we're stretching those dollars best we can, buying what's pertinent, avoiding what's not. But we're starting to get to a point where those numbers are becoming tighter for us. With that funding, we've been able to replace a squad. So our last squad was purchased in 2012, as well as the new engine that we talked about earlier. So our proposal for you guys is we're looking for around a $335,000 contract increase for 2021. So that would take our total contract to just over $1 million. And that would allow us to add some additional staff So the biggest expense with that we're running into now is hiring new members. So costs around $10,000 to $12,000 to hire a new member and train them appropriately. We recently implemented a few changes in our hiring process, so we're doing some physicals, psychiatric evaluations and screenings before, as well as background checks with the sheriff's office. So that combined with their 6-month probationary period is where we're getting that $10,000 to $12,000 mark. Depends on how quickly the trainee gets through that process as to how many shifts that they're working, but they're capped at 6 months on that. It also would give us the ability to retain the members that we do have. Obviously, we would like to retain the staff that we have, not lose them to other departments that would be paying more than we would be able to. We also have a few apparatus we're looking to replace, or that will need replaced in the next few years. So our Unit 3052, which is 2006 International, is going to be coming due here pretty shortly.
Squad.
That's, yeah, one of our squads. Still in pretty good shape right now, running well, but definitely something that we know we're going to have some increasing maintenance costs with over the next few years. Our boat as well is something that we're going to need to look at. So we unfortunately recently had a pretty big maintenance issue come up with it that opened up a few different issues that we have with the boat when we did take it in for service. So everything is okay with it for right now, but definitely something that'll need to be looked into. The other big item is looking at replacing our chase vehicle, which is a Ford Explorer. So not quite as costly of an item, but still definitely something to plan for and consider.
How old's the boat?
The boat is, one second.
06.
06, yeah. So 2006, and our chase vehicle is a 2010. So with all that, definitely a very brief overview of where we're at, but happy to answer any questions.
Can you afford a fourth man?
So if we were able to go through with this contract increase, with the understanding that it would take us a little bit of time to ramp up to that, we would have to hire personnel, make sure we have them available to fill that fourth slot on the schedule. That is something that we would be able to do, yes.
You can afford them.
If we were able to do it.
Because right now, it looks like you can't afford 3.
It's,
Your expenses are more than your revenues, is what you just told me.
we're,
Not without the levy.
No, right now, did I not understand this right? At the beginning, you
Yeah,
have a
correct.
slide
So-
here where you said,
Spending 880
and we're taking in about 800, yes.
yeah,
We're pulling from our savings account now, which is money we're saving for equipment.
Last year.
you can't afford 3. In my view,
That's correct.
you
Right.
can't afford 3 right now.
So one of the things.
How could we ever afford 4? That's my question. If we're running at a negative, if these numbers are right, and Dan, you're going to tell me, I think that you're going to tell me they are right.
Last year, we ran at a $60,000 deficit.
So one of the biggest.
Do you know what happens when the revenues don't exceed expenses?
What's that?
You go broke.
So the biggest reason that we're starting to exceed our income is about 2 years ago we did some pretty significant pay raises, because as we were going out looking for applicants, we were having a lot of trouble getting anyone to come in and apply. So we were starting to run into some issues where we were getting tight on our staffing. We did not have 3 guys on shift at times. we were really doing our best to go out to EMT classes, paramedic classes, fire academy, try and recruit some people, but we're having some difficulty with the pay rates we were at, because a lot of the departments around us were significantly higher. So we did a pretty significant pay increase across the board, and that went a long way in bringing people in. So we've been able to bring in a good number of applicants. About 10 of those have been hired on and gone through the process and have been extremely beneficial in making sure we're able to fill our schedule and still have 3 guys on shift.
It looks like most of the things you're telling me about tonight are fire related. Even though the bulk of our calls are EMS.
Mm-hmm.
So my question still remains, how many fire calls did we make versus, obviously the balance is EMS?
Mm-hmm.
And what percentage of all of our budget is going to fire calls versus EMS?
Mm-hmm.
And by knowing that, we would know where to put money.
So, as we talked about earlier, so if we go back to the graph that we have, so 56% are essentially pure EMS calls, we would say. So we're responding with a squad and that chase vehicle. The other aspect, there's a lot of crossover in the fire and EMS side of it. So when we're responding to car accidents, obviously we're utilizing, our fire engines as well as ambulances, but it's also the crew as well. Everybody's a firefighter as well as either an EMT or a paramedic on top of that. So the majority of our expenses at this point are personnel and being able to have them on station. But the biggest, we will definitely see a benefit if we're able to add an additional staff member on the EMS side of things. Today's, a good example, we had 5 different calls. Fortunately, we didn't have any double hits today, but if we go back to, they were well timed, so they were about 5 minutes apart. However, with seeing that increase, and also having a few more instances where we're transporting all 3 firefighters on an EMS call, so they're going outside of the township, taking patients to hospitals. That still gives us the ability to, even in that situation, still have one person who's remaining in the township and is at least able to first respond with the appropriate equipment while we are waiting for somebody else.
Is there a minimum number of personnel you have to have on a transport?
Yeah, so the state minimum, you have to have 2, they have to be at least 2 EMTs. So that would be one person driving and one in the back. So yeah, the standard is that's the standard arrangement. So we respond with the 3, and if that 3rd guy can peel off, if he's not needed, then he comes back to the station at that point.
Stuff like heart attacks and so forth, you need the additional personnel though. That's when it really counts.
Have we seen any increase in response times on, when you're talking about simultaneous calls, things like that? Like, is there the lack of mutual aid purpose there?
So we've definitely seen the biggest time that we see that is either at night when we don't have as many people, or usually we don't have anybody coming in for recall because unfortunately we don't have a lot of people in the township anymore. And then when those calls are very close back to back. So if we have something that's happening, within 30 minutes of the previous alarm, that doesn't give as many people time to come up to the station, be there, be available. So that's where we're seeing our increased response times is when those back-to-back calls are either close together or at night, or especially, if there's bigger incidents going on within the township and we're already pulling resources from our surrounding departments, then we have to go further out to have somebody who's
so it's
available.
not random, it's like in targeted time or windows that you guys have broken out. Is that what you're saying?
I don't understand your question, I'm sorry.
I was asking if there's an increase in response times, and you're kind of allowing, yes, there probably is,
Mhm.
but it seems to be like in certain windows.
So, yeah, definitely in certain windows. I unfortunately don't have the exact hard numbers to give you of, you know, if a call happens within, 15 minutes after another call, or 30 minutes, or 45. Don't have that information, but just looking at the situation, that's where we're seeing the biggest increase in response time.
I've been doing this for a while, and I've seen, I think your cover page here says something about the drive towards more staffing and personnel, and focusing on the 56% of the calls, which is EMS. That's been dramatic how that's changed in the last 20, 25 years.
Mhm.
So I've always been supportive of personnel. If you're going to have the station, well, John, you'll remember. Mario, you were kind of young, but Dan, you'll remember when we did the upstairs just to have some dormitory kind of space there.
Yeah.
It was hodgepodge, but it was, once you guys moved towards staffing, we had to do it. Of course, now we put we've done the addition with focus on that.
Well, I always tell everybody the best thing we ever did was put people on station, because if you remember back before that, we'd all be coming from home. 3 to 5 minutes to get from home to the station, the 3 to 5 minutes to get to the call. If you're having a heart attack or window of saving it, it's out the door. And since we put people on station, we've had some documented saves because we had the squad there right away, within 2 or 3 minutes. It's made a huge difference.
It has made a huge difference. One thing, Mario, I'm just going to say that there's been talk of reduced ISO ratings for as long as I can
25
remember.
years.
As long as I can remember. And we were a 9 then, and we're a 9 now.
Mhm.
Without central water, I don't think you get much further.
Actually, that's changed. And
So-
that's where we're heading towards.
Mhm.
Okay, so that being said, then, what other jogger communities, because there's a lot of them kind of similar to us, have done that?
Bainbridge has made some recent changes in ISO, done a lot, so's Chester.
How about
So
say,
Hamden,
how about
I
say,
believe,
I was
in
gonna- I was
Middlefield?
going to say Munson, Hamden,
Yep,
they've been able to lower?
yep.
I know Middlefield. I don't know what Middlefield is at right now.
Township or village?
Both. So
Both.
they've both been able to come down.
Because they have some central water in the village, in the township as well.
Yeah, but it also included the township, which does not have, a lot of places does not have central water.
Mhm.
How long do you expect this levy to last you?
As far as if it were to be a continuing levy that would be ongoing, we're looking about where we were with this levy, around that 10-year window.
We didn't get 10 years.
Well, our last levy was in
2010.
2010. So we're 10 years and 2 months.
May 4th, 2010, is when we got the last levy.
Mhm.
We're running at a negative right now.
Mhm. But due to
We didn't last what we projected this to last. And I know everything, costs of everything go up.
Mhm.
I understand that. But I'm just asking you questions that Joe, whoever, Smith is going to want to know if he's going to vote for this levy.
Right. So we're at 10 years right now, and at this point, we are starting to show some of the deficit on budget. However, we've been able to offset that with the money that is in our savings. So we've been planning for this up to this point, as we've, when we did the wage increases, we wanted to make sure we had enough funding
You have to
for
be
that to
competitive
last us
there,
for
I
a few
understand
years.
that. You have to be competitive. We found that staff in the road department, you got to be competitive.
Yeah, so by thinking ahead and planning for this point, we've been able to sustain that off of the balance that we do have in our savings account.
Had we paid this fire truck in full, we'd have about $300,000 less in savings than we do now, but in order to prolong, it's cost us interest. But
Yeah.
we just can't go out and buy a fire truck for $500,000.
And I guess the average when I'm asking some of these questions, I think you need the answers to them to tell people, is that how much are we paying for fire versus what are we paying for EMS?
Well,
And I think that the number of fire calls that were in Auburn Township is a very important number. I do think what PJ is getting at in response time, extremely another important number. And since we've started staffing, and I might be speaking out of school, but since we started staffing 24/7, our response time's pretty damn good.
yeah, absolutely.
Very good. And I, for one, have had several instances to call in the middle of the night. I think 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, I'd call that the middle of the night. And the response time was very good. And in my mind, like, call it was life-saving. That's, I think, extremely important that we need to let people know. So they're quick to a phone, you know, that doesn't matter until you call them.
Right, absolutely.
You know, Dan called them. I call them. Oh, wait a minute, this is way important. And I don't have, you know, I don't hear people complaining. And in the old days, we did hear people complaining. Trustees, it got to the trustees that, hey, you know, I could have, you know, read a book in the time it took to get there. That haven't heard that in all of. Have you, PJ?
No.
So you're doing a phenomenal job at that, you guys.
Well, thank you.
You're doing a phenomenal job at that. And the other thing I have to say is that the people who showed up on the call, first class.
It's good to hear.
And I can tell you, I have personal experience in over 5 calls. So, that's why we're here. That's why you guys are, you know, and so if we're going to improve our service, I think some of these financial things are, now that it's dropping down to another category as women. Can you afford to do this? And the question isn't can you afford it? Will the people support you to do this?
Absolutely.
And you got to have those answers so that the guy goes, well, yeah, you know what? That ain't so bad. Just drive myself to the hospital if I'm having a heart attack. And we all know, and we actually have part of a subdivision that's not even in Auburn Township. John will attest to this. We argued long and hard. It could have taken us 8 minutes to drive there. No, we're not going to have this. And in fact, we traded them off to Bainbridge, and said we'll take your tax dollars, but good luck with Bainbridge to answer these. If you need a problem, you're going to have to call them. We can't get there. So anyway, I just think we got to be prepared for the numbers.
Yeah, and that.
And this, I don't want to offend you or anything, but I'm like PJ. You've been selling me this ISO thing for way too long. We actually, Mike Troyan actually called his insurance company, and basically their answer was, well, you know, in some cases, your rates are going to go up. Yeah, maybe sometimes you're going to stay the same, and sometimes, boy, that was it was enough to say, well, wait a minute, let's start not worrying about that so much, but I'm more inclined to think that how fast we can respond to a 2 o'clock in the morning heart attack
Exactly.
Right. Well, I appreciate any effort you make towards lowering an ISO rating, but
Yeah,
And the-
it's been pie in the
Jay,
sky for
but I'm
me,
just
and I-
saying, that can't be our focus.
no, it's been pie
The
in the
biggest
sky.
thing with the ISO is, so not necessarily lowering the number, obviously that's a goal, but it's a great way for us to self-evaluate ourselves as a partner. So when they come in, they ask a lot of really good questions that are kind of
Operational.
operational, but a good reflection on ourselves to look at different areas of improvement. They brought up a number of things in our most recent review that we can definitely improve upon. So,
Are they like UL, or is that what?
Very complicated process.
Yeah, so it's like a UL rating.
Yeah. But we were nowhere near being able to get to an 8B before. We're very close to it now. This is some of the changes we've made over the years.
yeah.
Good.
Okay, I won't hold you to any solid anything here, but you're pretty specific with a $335,000 increase in the contract. So when you go down, your next slide is about the contract increase plans. Do you have a breakdown, like how much is this going to go towards this machinery replacement
So,
apparatus, and how much is going to go towards personnel?
Yeah, so absolutely. Over the next, looking at the next 5 to 6 years, as far as apparatus replacements go, we're going to have most likely an ambulance. Again, we're going to try and safely extend everything the best that we can. Most likely, we're going to have an ambulance we're replacing, as well as our boat, as well as a chase vehicle.
You've done the, and I've heard this from you guys, new squad, old squad theory all along. You got basically the new one and the one that's been around. Yeah, I get that, so that's probably a wise cycle to continue.
Right, exactly.
The other thing I guess what I'm looking for is like if I'm a voter, and I am, how much of this contract increase is going to go towards equipment, vehicles, and how much is going towards personnel? Frankly, I'm highly supportive of the personnel part.
So, one of the biggest, if we're looking at adding an additional staff member on station 24/7, that's going to approximately, since everything's part-time, we have some variable hours that people work, but we're looking at about somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000 to $100,000 for hiring costs. So that's the hiring process, their gear, uniforms, and then their training shifts as well.
So I didn't hear salary there.
It costs about $175,000, I think.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Do you pay to train these guys?
So when they come to us, they already have state fire cards.
Right.
So they have a state firefighter 2 card as well as at least an EMT card, if not paramedic. But we train them to everything that's specific to Auburn Township. So
Also continuing ed.
right. So Fire Academy is really highly focused on city firefighting. So one of the biggest aspects that we have to work on and train these guys for is the water supply issue out here. That coupled with EMS training, a lot of people will come in and they'll have been paramedics for a number of years, but they aren't used to necessarily being the only paramedic. So we work on making sure that they're ready to perform in that capacity, and just familiarizing them with our equipment, our response guidelines, and how we function as a department.
Do I understand this right then when you say that a guy, the 4th guy, it's really 4 guys? Because you're looking at like approximately 160-hour week.
160,
106 hours over 2 weeks.
it'd be over 2 weeks.
Okay. So this is more than one person.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah.
we would be hiring more than one
That's
person.
okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're looking at, if we were to add that 4th staff position, probably hiring about 8 to 10 new hires.
78% of our budget is wages anymore.
Well, you knew that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Used to be the opposite.
right. But that's the way the whole business went.
I think that's something we got to publicize.
Yeah, and like Mario said, in order to maintain, our turnover has really gone down since we've increased our wages.
We're a little more competitive now.
Yeah.
And our quality
Yes.
goes up. obviously.
And we're fortunate, our average length of service is about 15 years, which is a pretty good number, especially in comparison to most.
Yeah,
some
most
the
of these
departments
guys
around
retire
here.
at 20, right?
Yeah, most, right, yeah, 20 or 25 years in, you can retire, so.
And I didn't even know a guy was coming from Westlake. But can you imagine coming all the way out here from Westlake? Yeah,
So,
that tells you something.
back to my question, on this contract increase plans, you're looking at probably around if everything went per your request, you'd be looking at about 60% of this is going towards personnel and manpower, or more, maybe a little bit more.
I think
Probably
a little bit more.
more, so we would be about,
Five-ish.
yeah, probably about $300,000 to $350,000 in equipment, and then the remaining would be mostly towards manpower. There's always, the extra things in there, like, buying more station supplies and.
Yeah,
Preparation
yeah,
costs.
just your gear that you gotta replace.
Right,
periodically.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's gone up, not down,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Okay, my question, I have two-part question here. You realize that there's two steps to this. We can vote to put a levy on for you. How are you gonna get the levy passed when you don't have any people in your department that are willing to do anything but put in their hourly time? And I think you understand that when I say that statement, or do you not?
So we definitely, there's a few people that, come in and work their shift and aren't involved in too many things outside of that, but we definitely still have a good number of people who kind of have a little bit more of the old school mentality where it's not just a job, it's something where.
Canceled the pancake breakfast and got rid of them from the fire department, which was a goodwill mechanism.
Cancel
Got
the
rid of
one.
that.
Well, yeah, we reduced it
You
down
see
to
my
one
point?
for the year.
Well, part of the problem, John, is also, it's not the fact that they're not willing to come in, it's the fact that they're working 2 or 3 fire departments.
That doesn't have anything to do with it.
Well, yeah, it does when they're.
No, it doesn't, John,
they're
because
getting
somebody's
competing
got to
for
sell,
hours with other-
somebody's got to, first of all, we can't do it. That's against the law. You need to sell your own levy.
I agree
You
there.
realize that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed there.
And I absolutely understand your point. The biggest thing that we see is the overwhelming majority of our department have full-time jobs elsewhere. So they're already.
So do all the board of trustees.
So, with that being said, it is sometimes difficult to get people on weekends. They're already working 2 weekends a month at their primary job. They get a lot of pushback sometimes from their family and everything for some of those that are on the other weekends and things like that.
I'm just trying to make a point that we've canceled the 2 of the best public relations vehicles that this department's ever had.
Well, we just reduced from 2 pancake breakfasts
Yeah.
to 1, and
Yeah.
for this year,
Which was well
No,
attended, which was well
Scouts
attended.
did that.
Yeah, but we're still at the station.
Yeah,
It was at the station, yeah. But the
And
clam bake
the
is,
clam bake, we
that's
had
just
no
sign of
choice.
the times here too, really.
well, and for this year, unfortunately, it's
COVID
the
took out the
circumstances
clam
that we're
bake.
in.
Well,
Made that
I think
decision,
that's, I don't think you could, was anybody in favor of putting that on anyway?
but we do still have some people that are, in favor of that, and I've always been good about coming up and putting, time into that.
John, by the board voting to put the levy on the ballot, all right, that tells the people out there that voted for you to be trustee, hey, I trust them. By them voting to put this levy on, you're selling it just by doing that.
That's why we're here.
Somewhat, and I'm.
That's why we're
To
here
some
right now.
extent.
Just somewhat, I would
That's
say.
why we're asking all of the questions
Right.
right now.
I would say to put it on the ballot is more a confirmation that it's a valid request, is what I would say. And I don't think it indicates overwhelming support. I think it's a valid request and something the voters can decide. That's
Because
my
it comes
opinion.
down to this decision. you need to convince, or you need to somehow impress people that if there's 2 calls at the same time, one of you guys, if you're having the heart attack, make sure you have the first one, not the second one.
Right. Exactly. And that's for
Under our situation right now, you don't want to be the guy having the second one. You want to be the guy having the first one.
Mhm.
If we can
Which
get
we-
another man on there, we can get both of you to the hospital if you drive the right directions to the hospital.
Well, you know, I think that we've taken good care of our community over the years.
Oh, I
And I
do
think we've
too.
been good stewards of the money. Like when we passed the last levy, it was 753 to 391, good margin. The residents supported us. And
But
before
that also
that, there
included
was,
the building, John.
It
And
did,
there was
it
did,
did.
no
but-
question that the building
But the,
absolutely needed improvements. We couldn't continue on the route we
I'm
were
not hanging
going.
my hat on that completely. I'm just saying, the residents supported us really well on that.
And you guys, another thing you did is you brought, for many years, you toured that building, that new building, to show people what they got with their tax dollars. It was a big part of it to let people know that, hey, this is a for real thing here. We're not some backyards operation.
It's a professional operation.
this
we
was,
used to
that was,
be-
the building was a serious move in the staff.
Yes.
It was a big
It
step.
had to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, big step. And as a guy, though, who called the station in 1979, and they came in a Suburban,
Before they
it was
called,
very timely and very highly skilled people then too.
a few years before they
But
called the funeral.
right now,
Yeah.
we didn't have the abilities then that we have today. Get a hold of wherever we're taking you to. You know, the technology has increased. You guys have kept up with the technology. I think that's a huge part of this.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to talk to Fred here for a second, so I'm kind of summing this up a little bit. I believe a voted mill at 100% collection brings in approximately 260,000.
Yeah, around there.
So that's as I said, that's at 100% collection, which the voters told us to gear that down.
Yeah, it's, you know, we usually calculate that at about 240,
Right, and
250.
there are collection fees.
And there are collection fees too associated with that.
So without putting a hard number on it, we're looking at about $1.5 million.
No, well, I talked to the chief, and to cover their contract increase, and we also, if we look at the numbers of where we've been going for our operating costs of the building, workers' comp, and other administrative costs and repairs, we're typically operating at a deficit just on our end, and we had a large cushion. If you go back 3 or 4 years ago, we had a nice rollover. Now, of course, the Budget Commission's priority has always been get that rollover down. So we
Have a
went
plan
from
for it or don't collect.
well, we went from a $500,000 rollover to we're looking at a $100,000 rollover if we're lucky next year. So we've got some increased expenses on our part. A lot of it's the administrative and workers' comp. Their share of the premium has increased, but when you've got more calls and you've got more guys going out, you're going to have more incidents that are going to have to be covered. So what we were looking at to cover everything would be about a 1.8. And that would, we're looking at a 95% collection rate of about 463,000. And that would give us enough that we wouldn't have to operate at a deficit, and then they would be able to do their staffing. I mean, there's not there's not a whole lot of cushion there, but it would give us plenty to work with on our side. Roughly 120,000.
And, you know, that's, as you're seeing, this is all, we're making the sausage right here, this is all done. Personnel levies, and if this is heavily, with these administrative costs, you gotta add that to the staffing, to the personnel side of the levy, so to speak. It's probably still running at that 60 to 65%. And you're dedicated to a personnel levy, I lean towards continuing.
Okay.
And one reason I say that is if you do it on a 5-year term, and we see it all the time with our educational system, they're gonna threaten cuts all the time, every time the levy comes up, and I don't.
Hate to hear that from a public service like a fire department.
I just don't think that's good management.
No.
I don't.
Well, you know, we had this discussion also, the staffing's not gonna come down. We don't see it unless there's a sudden exodus from Auburn.
Right, and neither do I wanna threaten that every 5 years.
Right.
Because boards, it happens, that's what governments do, they threaten if we don't get this levy, we're gonna have to cut this. You know, your kids are gonna have to walk to school or some such thing, so.
And unfortunately, you know, with where we're at, having 3 guys on station, you know, we kind of calculated the numbers out. You know, it would be ideal to put like maybe another half person on, and then you can, you know, cover those times when you do those simultaneous calls, bigger incidents, everything like that. But unfortunately, that's not an option of something that you can do. We don't really have a great time of day that we can pick to do that. So, you know, instead of it would be great to do, you know, a 15% increase in staffing versus this 33% increase, but being with the, you know, smaller department that we have, it's not an option for us, unfortunately.
Well, and, you know, should this go to the ballot, as we're discussing, you also have the mortgage on that building.
Yeah,
Not
so
that building that's going to.
when I look at the revenue that comes in off of the levy for the contract and for our side, everything that the township is paying, I've got to take that $152,000 payment that we have right off the top.
Yeah.
So I mean, we actually don't even get that money in the fund to spend. That goes into a debt.
Right.
But what we're talking about is the window that this levy keeps the fire department, increased staffing,
Yeah.
a baseline replacement level on equipment. Also coming in at the end of this window is towards the end of that payment over there.
10 years out.
The end is in sight there.
Yeah, the end is
Yeah,
in sight,
yeah.
yeah. I think it was a 25-year
Yeah.
term.
And we're still
But that's based on the original valuations of the levy too. So every year our income from the levies has gone down. Right, Fred?
No, it doesn't go down. You get,
It hasn't gone down, but you're not seeing the increase when they do evaluation of the
Right.
township.
when they
It's the
well,
same.
well,
It's a straight line all the time.
no, new evaluation adds, or new building, new construction adds to the levy.
To the continuing level,
Right.
yeah.
New construction
New construction,
drives
yes.
down the per unit cost to the existing base of people, but people don't understand that. Okay, well,
We'll talk with the fire liaison, who I think gets back in town tonight, right about now, so Mike will be certainly involved.
what's the timeline on this, Fred,
We need to pass a resolution at the next
at the next meeting?
Yeah.
And then, can you do a resolution? Can you do everything in one night?
Yeah, we do a certificate of need and a resolution in the same night.
In the
We've
same
done
night.
that before. And we don't have a lot of time, because we only have a couple of days to get it down to the Board of Elections.
And make sure we don't have a mistake.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, we want to get it put together as soon as possible, so that we can pass it through all the right hands before we can take it down to them.
Have we determined if there's a road levy expiring yet?
Yes.
There is one, I thought so. But Chuck said we did.
I don't agree. Okay, and I spoke with, I believe, yeah, it was Kristen Sinatra at the auditor's office, and she said that she doesn't see it on her records, but last year, I know they told me last year if we wanted to put it on a year early, we could put it on last
That's
year.
what I remember.
So rather than take the chance of finding out that they're incorrect, we need to put the levy on.
You can always put it on, and then if it doesn't work out, you do it, you're not gonna lose any revenue.
Right, and I believe we could have done that last year, so this is the year that we need to put it on.
That's what I thought.
I agree with you.
That's a one no.
But let's talk about these guys.
Yeah, well, it's valid issue.
Well, you hear my concerns is A, we have to sell the personnel aspect of this.
Mm-hmm.
You have to sell it, I can't sell it. And I am concerned, and I just, some of it from talking to the chief about, hey, you know, guys have 9 jobs, guys have, you know, I mean, I understand that. The residents, that doesn't mean anything to them. It just doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely. And our, you know, of the guys that we do have on shift, they know, you know, when they're on shift at Auburn, that's their time to be at Auburn, and it's not taking a second place to anything else. You know, unfortunately, when they go back to their personal lives, it's a little bit of a different story. So,
Well, you said most of the employees are from out of town now. You're actually a rare bird now, because you know you got Chief and Mansco that grew up, and you grew up right down the street.
exactly.
So there's not a whole lot of you guys around, you know. So thank you.
DJ, you have any other questions for these guys?
No, I think we, you know, we'll work with Mike when he's back tonight or tomorrow, and we got some work to do between now and next meeting. As you know, I stated earlier, I'm generally supportive of personnel type issues, and we've got, you know, getting close to 20 years now managing personnel there, so this is not like this is anything new anymore here. And there's never once that I can remember in the 20 years of staffing that department that anybody did chicken little, we're going to have to cut staffing. I've never heard of it. I appreciate
No,
that. I appreciate that.
And I agree.
That's
DJ.
one threat we don't want to have.
We don't want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah.
And you want to avoid that at all costs. That's no way to threaten service.
Well, you remember a long time ago we had issues between the contracts and stuff. Even when we had no contract, we were still making sure the township was protected.
I mean, back in the
The skinless days.
guys' days, that was PJ, I think, that was your job then. Yeah. Okay, well, gentlemen, we've got a little bit to think about here. And like I said, we can't do this without Mike being here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So you plan coming up on the next meeting then?
Well, I think that's the only choice we have.
Right, yeah.
Any questions that you guys have, concerns?
I think
comments?
my
Sure there will
question
be.
is,
Sure there will
I'd
be.
like to see the fire calls.
Okay, you know, we'll kind of get
I'd
that.
like to see that. And see if there was ever anybody who drove the wrong direction to the hospital.
We'll defer that to the operational side as far as the chief goes.
Didn't drive the wrong direction, just took a different route.
It was the wrong direction.
It's different when you're riding backwards, though.
When you're hauling, do you think if they were hauling the President of the United States, they would go the wrong way?
Now? Yeah, they probably would.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, guys, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do appreciate everything you guys do. You've provided a hell of a service for us, and we've gone from a, let's not say backwards, but boy, we've come a whole long way. And you know, you kind of even forget, PJ, the upstairs.
Yeah.
Those days upstairs, you know, I can't even believe it. You know, those are so far in the rearview mirror right now that.
We did what we had to do at the time, so.
I mean, we did what we had to do, yeah, you did what you had to do, but I mean, I also think that the township took the bull by the horns and we built a good facility.
Absolutely. Which has been fantastic, so I appreciate all the work everybody
Put
did on that.
we put the time and money into the facility, and
That's also where we met this guy.
Jim had a heck of a lot to do with that, and still has, so thank you, Jim. All right, we're gonna move on. You guys, if you wanna stay, you're free to stay. If you don't wanna stay, that, we just have a couple things here to take care of, like 700 things to sign, I think. PJ, you have a report you want to give?
The only thing I want to mention tonight is that the Red Cross is doing the blood drive tomorrow again up at Adam Hall, and there's been several up there already. And they've also been notified that they used to do these at schools, and it's probably not going to be available to them anymore. And so we're moving into an era, John, where Adam Hall is going to, the church is closed now. This is not going to be, the schools aren't going to be available for things like this. This building's going to be in demand for these type of functions.
Yeah, I don't have a 1 ounce, and I don't think I've never had a resident say a word to me, but it's perfect use for that facility once or twice a month is, and I do think the Red Cross likes the facility. It's worked out real well for them, so, I don't know.
We're gonna.
Have they asked to do more dates to Nancy?
Not yet, but they let us know it's coming.
Okay.
They don't pay any rental fees
They don't,
anywhere.
we don't charge them in nickel.
We don't charge them a nickel. I guess what I'm trying to explain here is stuff that used to happen for community or individuals at the church isn't there anymore.
We used to do that stuff at the fire station.
Well, there you go. So Adam Hall's gonna have a little bit different clientele, I think, for in the future, starting right about now. So
Okay.
that's just my thoughts. So.
I have one order of business. We did sell the Cruiser on Gov Deals, and we received $8,200, and we paid $7,500. We also did a project with Manaway when we got the Cruiser, and in-kind reimbursement on an issue 2 project was, I think, $17,000. So while we had it, it was quite a profitable machine. Unfortunately, we can do a project twice as fast, and the big issue is it's twice as fast and much neater. So there's not all of the extra ancillary cleanup that we were having to do. And so having said that, they would like to buy a wrist for the mini excavator.
A wrist. Oh, to turn the bucket.
Yeah. And so when you're going down a road like one, and I'm going to call them the township roads, and you're trying to scrape the berm, you can truly take the bucket, set it,
Right, at the right angle.
and peel the berm off of it without any trouble.
I saw at least 2 different guys running that machine when they're ditching on Stafford, and they did a pretty good job.
We
Yeah.
do
I was
have some
impressed.
guys that are good, and they just would like to make it, improve their productivity as well. You're looking at, somewhere $7,500 or so for a grist.
Gee, where are you gonna find that money?
Pardon?
Where are you gonna find that money?
Well, they were thinking of using the money that they made off of the, gov deals.
That's pretty good thinking. Do we
I don't
have,
think we have any more 40-year-old equipment down there.
Do you have a quote for one of them, or you're just gonna?
They would like to go out and, they just wanted to know before we go out and started hammering these guys, are we in favor of it?
Yes.
So, I'll tell Mikey to, put his chisel out and see what they can hammer this down to. I don't know, once again, going with the thinking they'd like to buy one that's new. You don't know how they treated the one prior, and that's worked out well for us on the Mini.
You go back, you start with the dealer we bought it from.
Yes, yeah, but having said that, the paving projects were down to putting top coat on. And so far, everything's worked out pretty well. They've done a pretty good job. We did have a couple complaints. They kind of mucked up May Court a little bit, parking equipment up there. So we'll give them a chance to clean it up. And a couple of the neighbors, they were parking on their lawns, and I don't know that they were. They parked in the road right away, but when you park in a road right away in a subdivision, people, it's their lawn. So that was that. Of course, Emmerich's on vacation this week yet, and Mike's been doing a real good job of answering all the calls and scheduling. I know we hammered off 25 resident ditch requests last week. Some bigger than others, obviously. So I'm very happy with that.
Sunday was hard on us.
Pardon?
Yesterday was kind of hard on us with the rain.
Yes. And James is extremely happy, and he's so far really toeing the mark for these guys.
Yeah,
So
that worked out okay.
I think we made a good hire there.
That we had a year for the guys to get used to them,
Yeah.
and just to see that he was right for the job, and that turned out all right, I think.
That's all I've got. Fred.
Just have a couple of things. Power went out here this afternoon, so I don't have too many reports other than our payment listing report of warrants 5886 through 5892, totaling $23,521.39. And then I do have a resolution for supplemental appropriations, and this is to appropriate some money in our general fund for the pavilion project. And here's the resolution by the Board of Trustees of Auburn Township, Geauga County, Ohio, that the following supplemental appropriations are necessary to pay for the construction of a pavilion at Auburn Community Park per the terms of a proposal accepted by the board on May 18th, 2020. supplemental appropriation of $96,500 to account 1,767.20 buildings.
That was resolution form.
Yeah, resolution 2020-17.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
PJ?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
That's all that I have.
Shuffle my agenda into something else here, so whatever's on there. Okay, that's about it then. We're still on schedule for cleanup day, or large item day, in September.
We are allowed to, speaking of that, we are allowed to get some labor to help us do that.
Yeah, you knew there was gonna be a second
With that grammar,
glamorous
yeah.
whatnot thing, and you're starting to hear.
So do I hear the motion of all motions?
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Second.
PJ?
Yes.
John?
Yes. Good night.
I told Emmerich I'd ask him.
8:47.
He's all concerned.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Good to see you, Dan.
Good seeing you, Jeff.
Good to see you, Dan. Remember me, it's all that hair you got going.
Is that your
We already had Woodstock.
That's like COVID.